But I wanted to ask you, because I know people will be fascinated, about how you got together with Bryson. How did that whole thing happen? How old was he when you got together?
I've known Bryson since he was 7, 8 years old. He grew up around here. His dad and I played junior golf together, so I've known him for a long time. His dad was the director of golf at the golf course, and so Bryson would hang out with us when he was 11, 10. Always picking on the older kids, that's for sure. And when he was 11 or so, 12, came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to be my coach." And he was very comfortable being in the tent. And I said, "Well, go tell your dad that he's no longer the coach, and I'll be happy to work with you." And so we became inseparable from that time on.
And when he was that age, was he as inquisitive and challenging then? I mean,
Yeah.
Was that evident?
Oh, yeah, always. Bryson was always, asking a million questions. And so, and again, my environment here, that's what I've always promoted. And so this is, I always make fun that this is a science project gone terribly wrong. And so Bryson obviously just was so, just thrived in this environment because, first of all, I don't say no. And if he asked a question, let's go figure it out what the answer is and whether I had it or not. And so whether he was 12-year-old asking those questions or 17 years old, none of those things changed.
Right. But his swing changed.
Yes.
In that time.
Yeah. So, he was, again, we were, quote, conventional. I don't know if anything we did was conventional. In fact, he was about a 5-degree flat iron for a long period of time. So that would kind of blow people away considering what they see now.
At what age?
15, 16 years old, right about the time he decided to go to the same length golf clubs or one length golf clubs. And so, it wasn't until he really started diving into the golfing machine that he realized that he wanted to change a few things, namely his hand position at address and impact. He wanted those two things to match. And so, the golfing machine kind of led him down that road to, where he is today.
So when I look at the golf machine, and I look at the book and I put it down about as quickly. Now, I've really tried to understand it, and it seems to me incredibly complex.
Sure. Especially like me, I was dyslexic. So, for me to even read any book was very difficult. So that book even made it worse. But the cool part about the golfing machine, I started reading it in 1970, 76, maybe 77. And I started to go see Ben Doyle over in Carmel, and that was because of Bobby Clampett at the time. Bobby Clampett was a legend in junior golf and amateur golf, and so the golfing machine was something new, and here this kid Bobby Clampett was setting the world on fire and how he played, and so of course again you wanted to be like him and wanted to see what it was all about. Unfortunately, it was in my backyard in Carmel. It was a 3-hour drive, and we get to go see Pebble Beach and the 17-mile drive, and we get to hit golf balls and so and get better. So for me, the golfing machine was, again, understanding the golf machine. You have to understand it's more of a manual than it is a book you read cover to cover and go, oh, okay, I got it. And so the golf machine has 13 trillion swings in it, so that's probably why sometimes it gets complicated for people. It's what I told Bryson. There's 13 trillion swings in there. Pick one. And so. And that's kind of where we ended up at the, the 24 components that worked for him that he really wanted to do. And he wrote down what he wanted in his golf swing. And he said, all right, this is what I want to do, and committed to it 100%. And practiced on, whether it was the PlaneSWING or the circle that we invented as well. And so all those times of video and making sure he was validating what the golf machine was telling him. That's what he did every day, all day long.
So he went from 5 degrees flat to what?
To maybe 9 degrees upright. Wow. So if you look at his clubs, I mean, we've been as hot as much as 72 degrees, let's say on a 7-iron. So that would be 9, 10 degrees, depending on whose lie angles you're looking at. But yeah, that was just what it ended up being. And that's a big change, no doubt. And his dad wasn't very happy with us or with me at that time. So, again, you have to understand Bryson. That's just him. He's willing to go places that nobody's willing to go, and willing to test. And it's not easy, and because there's a lot of failure in there. And Bryson failed a lot. It just so happened he was a very, very good junior golfer, and we were doing things that nobody thought of, and there were some bad rounds in there from time to time, and there were certainly phone calls from Dad that, what are you doing with my kid, and so on. But again, it was all choices that Bryson wanted to do, and so I was just willing to help, guide him in those, going, okay, maybe this one's not so good, let's reel it back a little bit. But when you look at just the club perspective and the starting with the clubs that were the same length, I mean, I was all in. I just saw it was such a benefit, and it was certainly a benefit to him and what he wanted to do. That's for sure.
Right. So when he made the shift from 5 degrees flat up, what sort of age was that? Did he make that change?
Probably 16, 17. It was a very quick change. And so he realized that what had happened was right before the US Am at Erin Hills, he was 16, I believe. He asked me, why do I have to play variable length clubs? And I said, well, Bryson, that's a very easy question to ask, but a very difficult one to answer. But we can certainly go home and test it. Of course, when does he ask? Right before we leave to the US Am. And so we came back home, and I took a set of Nike clubs that I had that were cavity back, and we destroyed them. And we figured out what the head weights had to be, which the head weights we agreed upon was about 282 grams at the time. And again, if you look at a pitching wedge, or let's say a sand wedge that had 300 grams, to take 20 grams of weight off a club, you would think, oh, that's simple, 20 grams, that's nothing. Oh, that's a lot on a golf club. And so Bryson came up with his own specialized grinds, which was very interesting. We had to add 30, 40 grams of lead tape on clubs to make everything, again, at 282 on the head weights. We threw dynamic gold 6-iron shabs in all the clubs, because that's all we could afford at the time. And he went out and played. And we went to the second hole when we tested it finally. We went to our second hole, it's now the 11th hole, and went to the first hole and played it normal. Said 8-iron, that's like my normal club anyway. Went to the next hole, and we were about 210 yards out. He got his 5-iron, and he looked at me and he said, this could change the game. And he stuffed it in there about 10 feet and never looked back. He won a bunch of junior golf tournaments with those clubs, as bad as they were. And then fortunately we had a manufacturer kind of help us out, good friend of mine who was on tour and helped me get some heads that they weren't perfect, but they were better than what we had. And we used those for a while. And then fortunately David Adele made some clubs for Bryson, and they were more legit. And then again, he ended up with Cobra. So that's kind of a quick synopsis from the start of one length.
Don't just cut all your clubs down.
No doubt.
To 6-iron length.
No doubt. A lot of people have done that, and they call and they text me. It doesn't work. And again, the heads have to be a certain weight. So I think Cobra's right now on their clubs are around 270 grams on their head weight, so they can create a little bit of speed there. I know we've experimented with heavier weights as well, but again, the heads need to all be the same weight in order to make it work correctly.
Right. And sort of going forward from that, he's been experimenting with a longer driver as well. Is he just always thinking as to,
no doubt about it,
what if this,
yeah,
what if that?
Yep, no doubt about it. And again, he might the long driver thing doesn't work at this point. It's obviously longer drivers are great for long drive contests, but very difficult when you're trying to somewhat hit it on the golf course when you're playing competitively. So that hasn't worked out quite yet for him, but yeah, he's always been that way. It's like, hey man, I want to test this. And unfortunately for equipment manufacturers, that's not easy, because usually he's going to ask that question on Tuesday when he's at a tour event. The funny thing about him now, when we didn't have any money, it was easy. Hey Bryson, this is it. Make it work. Once he ended up on tour and obviously could get whatever he wanted and whenever he wants it, that is so difficult from a manufacturer perspective. And so, I know Cobra's, loves Bryson, but I know how hard it is when he's like, we need to try this or do this. And again, on the fly, it's not very easy to do.
And it's interesting, that brings me on to Team Bryson, really. Because if you've got the manufacturers, and he's been as challenging as he's been, I mean, you've got a pretty impressive team around him.
Yeah, you bet. And again, that was my view. If I don't have an answer or we need somebody, let's go find and try to get the right person for the job, whether it was our caddy, Tim, who's, as far as I'm concerned, best caddy on tour. And he was a perfect fit. I've known Tim for a long time, and just felt like that he would be the right guy for the situation we were in at the time. Bryson had gone through a couple of caddies already, and Tim was a perfect fit. He bought into everything that we do. He likes science. He likes all the stuff that we try to do, especially a lot of the things that Bryson does when he plays, or again, whether it's barometric pressure or so on. You got to have a unique caddy, for that. The sick guys, again, when we went through that process, it was a very difficult time. He was doing face-on putting, and we all kind of know how that worked out. I still feel that was the best way to putt. I think Bryson even at times picked up the putter that I still have it, and he goes, "Man, I putted good with this thing." And so, again, and again, that's a whole nother story. But again, he hadn't putted conventionally for 4 or 5 months. He called me after, I think, Valspar, and what do I do? I need a putter and I don't know what to do. And, I said, gave him a couple options, and we had met the sick guys a few months prior. And I said, why don't you take a drive to Orlando and meet with Steve Harrison and the sick guys. I said, they're kind of crazy like us. And I think, you'll spend a couple of days with them, and they have kind of a frat house, which is kind of funny at the time, and because they had no money either. And I said, I think they'll build a putter for you, and I think you'll have a great time. It'd be good for you. Came up with the arm lock that he's putting with today, basically. And, I think it was 2 weeks later, he played in Puerto Rico, finished second, and is, really has never looked back regarding the arm lock. Again, Cobra's been amazing, trying to, come up with great product for him as well. And so, again, it's just getting the right people together. Greg Roscoff with MAT, muscle activation technique, for him, and his fitness. So all those people in place, it's an amazing team, and it's much appreciated.
And the bulk that he put on, I mean, he did put a lot of bulk on, quite clearly, you could see that. But it was, from what I saw, and I slowed down a few, so I'm looking at everything, and I just saw it. He wasn't muscle bound though. There was a huge amount of flexibility in there. Sure. I mean,
and that's one of the keys with muscle activation technique, and you'll never see Bryson stretch. That doesn't exist in muscle activation technique. And so from their perspective and Greg's perspective is that it's find end range and then strengthen end range, and that's how you increase flexibility. And that's just a little bit of how MAT works. Best to go look up MAT and Greg Roscoff, and you can certainly get lots of answers there in understanding MAT. But again, Bryson asked me, it was like a January 3.5 years ago, what do you think? I think I'm going to go to Greg. And I've known Greg since, again, he's from Fresno, and he worked for my sister, and my sister ended up working for him. And we were fortunate, and there was an MAT certified specialist at SMU, and that was one of the reasons why we really wanted to go to SMU as well. And so Bryson had been a part of muscle activation technique, but it wasn't until he actually got to go to Greg and really be with Greg that his life changed, I think, from a fitness standpoint. So he's been under supervision in respect to all the muscle mass gain, the strength, obviously what he's eating, nutrition. It was a little suspect, I think, in the beginning. But what's funny about Bryson, when I look back all the times I caddied for him, just to get him to eat anything was very difficult. I mean, when he was in competition, he just didn't eat. He was a thin guy. And so I was interesting watching him go through this process, and obviously eating what he was eating, trying to bulk up and so on. But obviously now he's trimmed out. He looks really good. And again, he's a beast when he works out. There's no doubt about it. He works out extremely hard, and not taking away from anybody, whether it's Brooks or Dustin or anybody that works out. Obviously, John Rahm, works out very hard as well. But again, Bryson sees something, and when he wants to go after it, he goes after it.
Well, I think all of these people, I mean, all of the athletes now, you look at Rory, and you know, he's 5'9", 5'10". He looks 6'3" when he's standing there with the ball. You know, his whole posture, and he looks so dynamic, and his chest and everything. And then I was just watching the Euros, and I was looking at Ronaldo, and you know, there's a guy. He could, if he wanted to, still be playing, I think, at the very top level at like 45, which would be, you know, unheard of in modern day. And so I can see now, you know, you look at Phil winning at 50. I mean, he's as fit as I've ever seen him look. He looks absolutely fantastic. You know, he'd really put on a few pounds at one point. So he's looking great. So the fitness thing is so important. But if you want to be the best, you want to be, you know, the very best you can be, you've got to surely look at every aspect of whether it's your fitness, whether it's the equipment, whether it's whatever it is, mental coach, you know, and so on. And good point on that. Does he have a mental coach? Or
so he works with it's Neuro Peak Vision. So yes, we always felt like the final frontier would be his brain, or anybody's brain, I guess, for that matter. And so he's been working with them for the last few years to understand how his brain works, and so you know, brain training, I guess you could call it. As far as a psychologist, sports psychologist, no, it's nothing like that. So, you know, it's truly understanding how the brain works and how to make it function at its peak performance, you know, and I think that's what he wants to understand more than anything. So yeah, we're trying to have everything in place that you need to have to be successful.